Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report Podcast, Energized by Self. I'm your host, Matt Matera, solo dolo today, but not to start the show. We're going to get into a ton of topics today, including what you see on the graphic here. Which Bucs are ready to take the next step? A little bit of different compared to the conversation that we talked about yesterday of Bucs that need to have good training camp. These are players that are pushed into a pivotal role, as you see there with Antoine Winfield Jr. He's been good. How great can he be, though? But to start off this show, we have a very special guest, as we're going to talk about Bucs punter Jake Camarda with punter specialist. I'm going to call him a punter expert, Dennis Brookner. And Dennis, thank you so much for joining the show today. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Expert about the punting position. I believe you started this a couple years ago, just sheer out of the fascination of what goes into being a great punter. You want to just tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're about with the punter position here in the NFL?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been running this Twitter account, Puntalytics, at the Punt Runts. Shoot us a follow for a couple years now. And there's this really cool community on Twitter that does all of this like open source analytics where like you can just download all of the play-by-play data in the NFL onto your computer and then do whatever you want with it. And we saw this space where everyone was doing all of these really interesting things with sports data and no one was doing that for punters. And we thought it would be cool to do that. And we kind of started filling that niche, and Twitter's responded really well. And we've had a really good time sharing all of our thoughts and numbers and stuff about punters.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because you've seen over the last couple years, and I'm still learning along the way too, just all the new stats that we learn about, not just at, running back, wide receiver, but as you mentioned, punter yourself too. So it's great that we're finding new ways to quantify things because I really think too, the punter position, and we'll see with the Bucs this year with Jake Camarda, because we saw it last year when Bradley Pinion started to struggle, especially towards the end of the year. The punter position, unfortunately, gets overlooked at times, but it's definitely a position that, without question, can change the facet of the game. So, like, overall, I just think it's great that we're finding new stats about it. Is there any punters when you first got into this that you were really a big fan of that kind of made you want to dig deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually a lifelong University of Texas fan, hook 'em. And so I'm not at a screen, hook 'em.
Yeah.
And so when Michael Dickson came onto the scene and then was the MVP of the Texas Bowl, it was really hard to look away. And it was just so exciting. And then the world got excited about Michael Dickson also. And that was a lot of the, and then he had the double punt last year and everyone was excited about him all over again. So that's been really fun. We've also had the chance to chat with some NFL punters, which has been great. We did interviews with Jake Bailey of the Patriots and Jack Fox of the Lions and Brett Kern of the Titans, which was fun. Some young guys, a legend. And it's been really cool to learn more about it.
Yeah, and I like two punters that really start showing more of their personality. Like, obviously, Pat McAfee became a huge conglomerate. And I think it, too, not even personality-wise, but some of the punters that really first stood out to me were the Colquitt brothers. I mean, they're like kind of punting royalty. And then Tom Tupa, Bucs fans are familiar with him. He also played for the Jets a little bit, too. But, all right, let's get into Jake Camarda now. Obviously, the Bucs drafted him in the 4th round. It was the year of the punter. I would say the punter and the wide receiver when it came to this year's 2022 NFL draft. But in your opinion, just watching him at Georgia, looking at the tape, looking up the stats, what's kind of the first thing that really stands out to you when we talk about Jake Camarda?
Yeah, so the word that you hear tossed around when the experts talk about Jake Camarda is pro-ready, which means a couple of different things. One thing, and we'll talk about Matera for sure. There's a ton to talk about there.
100%.
But Jake Camarda excels in all parts of the field, which is something that I think a special teams coordinator is really looking for. He also played really well for multiple seasons in college, which is not even something you always expect from a college punter or any kind of college player. They were 18, but he's been playing really well since his sophomore season. And we don't actually personally keep track of like all of these other numbers like hang time and operation time, which is time from snap to punt. But from what the experts say, he is really good in those areas as well. So he has all of the makings of like a pro-ready, pro-caliber kind of punter.
Yeah, and as I just said too, it was the year of the punter. We saw a run of punters this year, probably more than maybe ever in the NFL draft. And not just punters getting drafted, because you would see that at sometimes later on day 3. But we saw punters going early, like in the 4th round. So why do you think that was such a big boom this year when it comes to the punters?
Yeah, so I think that if you're the Bucs, my guess as to what was going on in the Bucs draft room is that they had like draftable NFL caliber grades on 2 people, on Jordan Stout at Penn State and Jake Camarda out of Georgia. And 3 picks ahead of them, the Ravens take Jordan Stout, and they think, oh man, we're in sort of a bind here. There is only one punter left in the world who we think is starting caliber, who we can get on a rookie deal. And whether that was the right decision is sort of another question. But in their mind, the demand is so low, or rather the supply of punters is so low that you get these big gaps in the set of prospects. And they were like, if we don't get Camarda, then what are we going to do? We're either going to have to pay Bradley Pinion $2.9 million or find some other rookie free agent punter who we don't think is going to be able to cut it. And so maybe there was a little bit of panic in the draft room when Jordan Stout went that high. But you have to think that they were like, if we don't get Camarda, we're just out of luck for a punter. And so they jumped and it cost them, if instead they were going to take a cornerback in the 4th, which they wound up doing in the 5th.
Yeah.
Is the difference between those 2 prospects more or less than having a serviceable punter? I don't know. But I think that's probably what drove them to take a punter as high as they did.
And one of the punters still on the board at the time was the punt god,
Exactly.
Matera. And I think a lot of people were surprised that not only was he not the first punter taken off the board, he wasn't even the second punter taken off the board. Now, I had spoken to someone and spoken to a source that said one of those reasons that it could be is because he mainly, I believe, just punted at San Diego State, I believe, where he played, where Camarda did all of the other things, especially as a holder. Like, Araiza never held, and I think that's a huge caveat that, again, people overlook. But, yeah, you might be able to trust your backup quarterback, but for the most part, it's your punter that's holding those field goals and extra points. Do you think that really played into why, he got taken later than the other 2 punters?
It certainly can be holding. It's hard to know. We don't have numbers on that. So it's funny. People tweet at us sometimes like, what about the holding? And we'll always respond, what are we, hold-alytics? Like we just don't know. But the other really interesting thing about Araiza is that he just, he is a just completely different mindset of a punter than all of these like other kind of more pro-ready guys. Which is, when we talk about puntalytics, we always talk about there being sort of 2 phases of the field, with the dividing line being your own 40 line of scrimmage, where when you're further back from your own 40, you're in open field territory. And when you're ahead of your own 40, you're in pin deep territory. And the idea, or rather the expectation, is that when a punter is in pin deep territory, they're no longer trying to just demolish the football. They're trying to aim and pin the other team deep. Araiza basically just didn't do that. And from wherever he was on the field, he was just like, I am going to take years off the life of this football. And he did. Ball comes off his foot different. And so he was hitting 40-yard touchbacks and 50-yard touchbacks and 70-yard touchbacks. He was just demolishing footballs. But you look at that as an NFL team and you think, in the situations where we have to punt from midfield, this is just a guaranteed touchback every time. That's sort of, I think, a turnoff for a lot of special teams coordinators.
Right. Yeah, interesting there, because I want to ask you next about, as you just mentioned, he just booms the ball. I was curious, in your opinion, where you think Camarda's strength and weaknesses are, or if he's stronger at just booming the ball. And obviously, with being a punter, it's more than just booming it. You got to have the hang time to make sure that the rest of the punt team is going down there. Or does he specialize a little bit more? If you're doing those punts, where the ball's at midfield and you're going to snap it back and pinning those players deep. Where do you see the strengths in Camarda there?
Yeah, so Camarda is definitely much more of a like all around punter. His like in our EPA stat, his splits in open field versus pin deep are pretty even. It's always a little bit hard to tell because pin deep, there's like a little bit more randomness and typically a smaller sample size. So you don't always get the world's clearest answer on is this guy really good in pin deep situations. But early returns on the college numbers we have are that he can definitely pin the other team deep.
Yeah. Have you seen any correlation with, Camarda is going to be doing the kickoffs as well too. Like he's not just punting. He's doing a role that if you look around the league, it's mainly kickers doing the kickoffs. Not every single team, obviously, but with him doing that role as well too. I don't know if you know how that affects the leg differently, or if you've seen any correlation in the numbers between effectiveness of punters that have to focus strictly on just punting the ball and punters that are performing the kickoffs and then also doing, their regular punting responsibilities as well.
Yeah, it's not something that we've looked at, though we totally could because we could just figure out who's doing kickoffs pretty easily.
Yeah.
You do see, when people talk about why it is that no one does double duty punting and kicking in the pros, which is basically unprecedented in the modern era, that like just fatigue is something that's talked about. And so you could certainly imagine that fatigue is a thing that plays into people who have to do kickoffs as well. Seeing as it's something you do at least as many times as you punt in a game. Is that true? That's probably true.
Yeah.
Happened a similar number of times.
Have you ever seen, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Tom Brady actually has a couple of punts to his record. I believe he has 3 punts. They all came with New England. They were more a pooch kick situation. What's your analysis of Tom Brady's punting? Because on the video, he's pinned the opponent deep, like pretty well.
It's super funny that you say that. So during the whole fake retirement situation, we had queued up this tweet where we were going to be like, the plan for the tweet was like, how can Tom Brady be the GOAT when he only ranks X all time in punter EPA, like custom punter EPA stat? And then we crunched the numbers and he's first. And we were like, unbelievable.
Of course.
But
Of course he is.
His 3 punts were very, very good. So, and I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that, including that there's no one back, which is the whole point of doing that in that situation. But yeah, his 3 punts it's the best 3 punt career we've ever seen.
Of course it is. That shocks me absolutely in the slightest. Like that's it's unbelievable, but it's also the most believable thing at the same time that Tom Brady dominates literally in every category that he possibly can. Dennis, I got one more question for you. And again, thank you so much for your time for coming on the Pewter Report podcast. Just curious, we talked a lot about Bucs punter Jake Camarda. Is there another punter in the league right now that maybe gets a little overlooked that, NFL fans in general should be keeping their eye on?
Ooh, that's a great question. Who should we be keeping an eye on? So there are 2 young guys who I think don't get a lot of love nationally, who are Logan Cook of the Jaguars and AJ Cole III of the Raiders. They're both guys, still on rookie contracts. They don't get a lot of love. They're sort of understated, but they have played super well every year that they've been around so far.
Okay, you heard it there first.
Yeah.
Dennis Brookner, thank you again so much for coming on the show. Please, one more time, just plug your social media and website and everything.
Yeah, totally. We are Puntalytics on Twitter at the Punt Runts. You can find us on Twitter. You can also check out our website at puntalytics.github.io, which has some longer form versions of our stuff. That's, of course, linked from our Twitter as well. Shoot us a follow. There's lots of good highlights and numbers and plots and all the punting information that you're looking for.
There you go, everybody. Make sure you check that out. Again, Dennis, thank you so much for coming on the show and helping us learn a little bit more about Bucs punter Jake Camarda. Thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your day.
All
right. Thanks again to Jake for coming on the show here. And ladies and gentlemen, you know what I'm going to get into next. It is Celsius Energy. If you don't know by now, you should know. Celsius Energy is hands down the best energy drink that we got going on today. The flavors are fantastic, all right? And it's not just one flavor, it's all of them. You got the sparkling wild berry, you got the sparkling orange, tropical vibe, peach mango, watermelon, Arctic, glacier freeze, like literally everything that you want to know about Celsius or you want to drink, they have it. As you see right here, they have the Arctic vibe, the tropical vibe, and the peach vibe as well too. So make sure you go to Celsius.com and hit on the store locator to find out where you can get Celsius Energy. And, they have it at every local gas station, bodega, chain stores, whether it's like Walmart, they have it all over. Target, they got it there too. So go to Celsius.com or you can order it on Amazon. It's the shits go to your door in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You can set it up in there. And the beauty of Celsius too, it's not just the flavor. I mean, you're drinking an energy drink because you want the energy to get you through a day, you know, whether it's a long work day, maybe you got a big playoff game going on later. I'm in a volleyball league. Everyone makes the playoffs. We're a pretty good team. So when I got a tough game going on, if I know the championship's coming up, 3-time volleyball champion, by the way, in this league, I make sure I have a Celsius energy drink. So again, great flavors, none of the jitters, none of the crash that comes after. And also, I'd be remiss too if I did not mention the fast brands. They have, again, like the flavors, I can't even get into like how realistic they are. Other companies, you hear this flavor, you hear that flavor. It doesn't really taste like it. I know they're trying to market it to you. That's not the case with Celsius. When they say that they have chocolate or peanut butter, it legit tastes like that. If it's a watermelon drink, that tastes like watermelon. All right. It's like there's no BS when it comes to what's going on here with Celsius Energy. So again, go to Celsius.com. Check them out on Amazon as well, too, and you will not be disappointed. Celsius Energy Drink, Pewter Report Podcast, Energized by Celsius. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a little bit of a different show today. As you see, I'm just running it solo dolo, as I said before. And again, thanks to Dennis Brookner for joining the show today. One of the topics that we're really going to get into, and I had it on the cover, as you see, is which Bucs are ready to take the next step. I think there's a lot of guys, a number of people that should be on the list this year in total. And first of all, too, yesterday we talked about a lot of the guys that need to have a good camp. These players don't necessarily fall into that. Don't necessarily fall into those categories. I'm talking about guys that are either on the up and up or going to be asked to even further their game this year. Got some great people in the chat too. We're also going to entertain this as a Q&A as well. So everyone get your comments in. Adam Davies right here. Love it, Dennis. Love what Dennis has to say. Shane said cool info. So make sure if something you want to say, we'll talk about it on the show here. It's a free forum, It's just me, your boy, Matty M, on the show today. Ibrahim brings up a great point too. Camarda runs a 4.56. I like the fact that he actually ran in these categories. Not every punter does that. I mean, you go back to the NFL Combine, and there were wide receivers that didn't want to do the bench press because they were running the 40-yard dash later. I don't necessarily know how it correlates from doing a bench press and then you can't run anymore. I understand you got to pump the arms and everything like that. But for Camarda to go out and do that, and when we spoke to him last week as well, too, Camarda talked a lot about how much, he played multiple sports. He played baseball. So he said like he liked using that competitiveness and would bring it to the football field too. He obviously played at Georgia, which is a big school. And one of the things Camarda really talked about was the fact that was the fact that he almost scored a touchdown on a trick play last year. So he's hoping that the Bucs will run a play or two this year where maybe he'll get that chance to score a touchdown. Edward here says LFG. Thank you for watching, Edward. I really appreciate that. Before we get into the topics of which players are going to the next this year, also just want to get to some current event news that the Buccaneers had going on this week or even today. We heard the news that Byron Leftwich and Jackie Davidson are going to the spring meetings in Atlanta. That is coming up in just next week, actually, the 23rd and the 24th. They will be a part of the NFL Coach and Front Office Acceleration Program. This is a really cool program that the NFL has set up where they're going to have over 60 minority front office members and coaches, assistant coaches in this league that are going to get to go and network, speak to other coaches, front office people, some ownership people as well too, that are, and these are all men and women that are looking to take that next step, expand to the next role, become general managers and become head coaches. I mean, we already saw it with Byron Leftwich. He was almost the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars last season. Sooner rather than later, Byron Leftwich is going to be a head coach somewhere else. And when that happens, I hope he does, end up being a head coach on a team that has more potential than the Jacksonville Jaguars, with all due respect to the Jags and what they going on. And Jackie Davis, too. I mean, she has been instrumental since she joined the Bucs. I believe this is her third year joining the Bucs. She was with them. She was with, the New York Jets in their front office for about 11 years and then came over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Jason Light has talked a ton about how, she has been a huge help, especially with the Bucs winning the Super Bowl. Everyone remembers how tough it was going to be to re-sign everyone the next year, and they pretty much got everyone back. Same difficult task this offseason as well, too. And I would say the Bucs, for the most part, have really done a great job with that. They're able to get Carlton Davis back for, less money than the franchise tag. So that was a win there. They used that franchise tag on Chris Godwin. They still got him for a cheaper amount than the overall prices that you see a lot of wide receivers getting today, like Devontae Adams and the deal that Tyreek Hill is going to get. So Jackie Davidson has been a huge part of huge moves like that. Obviously, Leonard Fournette coming back for a 3-year deal, getting him into a reasonable area of the salary cap. That was a big move. So shout out to Byron Leftwich and Jackie Davidson, who will be going to those meetings next week at the Spring League meetings in Atlanta, where that will be going on. The other bit of news that came out from today is that we already have the schedule come out, including the preseason, obviously the regular season too. But if you saw, the Bucs' 3 preseason games are against the Miami Dolphins, Tennessee Titans, and the Indianapolis Colts. While the game for the Dolphins was pretty much all set in stone and ready to go, August 13th at 7:30, we didn't know the exact dates yet for the Titans game, which will be in Nashville, and the game in Indy, where the Bucs again will be on the road. So we got clarification now. The Titans game will be on August 20th, and kickoff will be at 7 o'clock. Then the next week, Bucs go to the Colts for a game on August 27th, and that game will be at 7:30. So that's just some housekeeping duties there. Let's get to some of the comments here that's going on. Shout out Josh Capo, who helped set up this interview with Dennis today. Reminder to everyone, hit the thumbs up button. Please do. It helps with their algorithm. It helps when you hit that like button. It spreads the word. It lets everyone know Pewter Report Podcast is going. Obviously, it's just me going today. We're going to have another member of the Pewter Report Podcast coming on later towards the end of the show. Not going to give up who that is just yet, but we will have another guest on later in this show. But yeah, hit the like button, hit subscribe, help us grow. We're about at 8.37 thousand followers right now, trying to get up to 9,000 and hopefully 10,000 right around when training camp gets going. So again, thank you to everyone that's watching this show right now on your Thursday. Supply and Demand says, I see you holding it down, Maddie. I appreciate you, Supply and Demand. You are the man. Thomas Gaines here says, Logan Hall is unproven. Ryan is a slight upgrade over SMB. Whitehead is better than Neal. Well, obviously, Logan Hall is unproven. I will agree with that standpoint. Now you're saying Logan Ryan is a slight upgrade over Sean Murphy-Bunting. Whitehead is better than Neal. Yeah, Ryan, I really think eventually is going to beat out Sean Murphy-Bunting for the nickel corner position. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, so you can go and watch yesterday's episode if you want to hear more of that. But I think SMB is going to be looking over his shoulder the whole time to see, whether or not he's going to be able to hold on to that position. Whitehead better than Neal? I would say As of right now, yeah, but you got to understand, like, Neal's coming off very serious injuries. He went from playing a linebacker position over to safety and moved back and forth there. So we'll see if he gets, full season now, if he can stay healthy, just playing at safety versus, going over to the linebacker position. I'm going to miss Jordan Whitehead. I'll still be watching him a lot with, the Jets playing, but he obviously brings a lot of, adrenaline to the game, a lot of great tackling up front. I think his people like to get on his pass defense too much. I wouldn't necessarily say it was as bad as anyone thinks. I thought he was pretty solid there, but we all know that he's at his best when he's in the box making those tackles for loss. So that's going to be a big thing. We'll see how the Bucs in the safety position really can change with that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will get into the Bucs players that need to step up in a moment. But first, I want to talk to you about Underdog Fantasy and the $10 million prizes that they got going on right now at Underdog Fantasy. First of all, Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy football. You could draft your team with no in-season management, get the optimal score each week of the season, and have a shot at over $10 million in total prize money, as you see there with their Best Ball Mania 3 contest. That goes up until now to the beginning of the season, but there's more incentive to start drafting now. Last year's winner that won over $1 million drafted their team in June, because there are some players that you might pick that, you hear about them in training camp and they're really excelling there. Then the cat's already out of the bag. If you start drafting now in May and in June, you will be able to get some under the radar guys that might pop up on your screen later. So that's why there's the incentive to start drafting now instead of waiting until the season starts to get going. So head to underdogfantasy.com or go to the app now and sign up with the promo code Pewter. And Underdog Fantasy is going to match your first deposit up to $100. Again, Underdog Fantasy, sign up with promo code Pewter and draft your Best Ball Mania 3 team today. Another thing, too, Underdog Fantasy with Best Ball Mania 3, they're closing in on 40,000 people subscribing to the Best Ball Mania 3. So the more people that sign up, the more money that you're going to have a chance to win. And like I said, if you start drafting now, you're going to get a lot of those under the radar players that won't be there value wise when you start drafting in August or maybe in September, right before the season starts. So start drafting for Best Ball Mania 3 right now. And, you see that big number, 41,000 subscribers. Yeah, it's a big number. You don't even have to do that either. You can go and set up an Underdog Fantasy account. You can do leagues of 3 people, 6 people. I believe they're going to get 5 people as well, too. So they are making sure that, if you just want to play with your friends, with your family, you could set up a league like that and do, as inexpensive as $3, $5, $6, all for just a simple sign up right then and there. Pewter Report is going to be setting up a lot of this too. You could play against me. You can play against Scott Reynolds, JC Allen, Casey Hudson, Bailey Adams, like everyone. Josh Capo as well too. We're going to have our own Pewter Report leagues too. You can go up against us. You draft your team, you set it and forget it. They'll also have weekly fantasy and daily fantasy as well too. And they got a lot of props and pick'ems right now too. So you could bet on something right now, such as I think Nikita Kucherov for the Lightning is going to have over 3 shots on net tonight. And hopefully the Bolts pick up another win against the Panthers. We'll see what happens with that tonight. So again, go to underdogfantasy.com and use the promo code Pewter. All right, folks. As I mentioned, we are going to talk about which Bucs are ready to take the next step. And since Antoine Winfield Jr. is on the graphic, we will start with Antoine Winfield Jr. And you're probably thinking, what are you talking about, Matt? Antoine Winfield Jr. is already a Pro Bowl player. What do you mean he has to take the next step? I fully understand that. But Antoine Winfield Jr. is a good, maybe great player. It depends on the argument. I'm not here to argue about, that stature of his game. But if you remember, we spoke to safeties coach Nick Rapone about 2 weeks ago where he said that he's going to challenge Antoine Winfield Jr. He wants Antoine Winfield Jr. to make it to that next level. He wants him to be an elite player. And he said that he is going to challenge him to get more interceptions this year. That's what makes you a great level player. That's what makes you an elite level player. So I think for Antoine Winfield Jr., if you look at his stats from last year, he had 13 games, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 3 fumble recoveries, 88 tackles, and 4 tackles for loss. And I understand, too, he's still a very young player in this league. I mean, he's going into, his third year in the NFL? That players learn at this point, and they're looking for Antoine Winfield Jr. to be the de facto leader in the secondary. Remember, with Jordan Whitehead gone, it's Antoine Winfield Jr., it's Mike Edwards, who we're going to talk about in a little bit here. So they're going to put a lot of the onus on Antoine Winfield Jr. I love when he's up at the line of scrimmage, he's going to blitz, get after the quarterback. As I said, he had, what do you have? 4 tackles for loss this season. I think he can bump those numbers up. The 2 interceptions, again, 13 games, so he missed a couple games. I think he can bump that up. I remember Nick Rapone said he wanted to get Antoine Winfield Jr. up to 6 or 7 interceptions. So we'll see if he can do that this year. I'm curious if he's going to take a little bit more of a leadership role or just command more when he's out there. Are they going to use him strictly as a free safety? Are they going to move him in the box as well, too? Because you're going to have Mike Edwards starting there at strong safety as well, too, which brings me to my next point. So we just talked about Antoine Winfield Jr. The next guy on my list, and we'll stick with the safety position, is Mike Edwards. I think this is a huge year for Edwards, and I am extremely excited about what he can do. He already had an interception in OTAs the other day. Now, again, he benefited from D. Delaney going and making a play right then and there. But Mike Edwards only played 57% of the snaps last season. All right. So he was only in a little bit of time. And he still led the Bucs in interception. He had 3 receptions on the season. Obviously, he had the 2 pick sixes in the same game against the Atlanta Falcons. And then he had another interception in the wild card round game at home against the Eagles. So this guy's playing a fraction of the snaps compared to everyone else on defense. And he's making all the turnovers. Like, he's the number 1 ball hawk on this team. We've talked about this before. But now, in terms of players going and making the next step, Mike Edwards is a starter now. All right. He's getting free reign to go out there and be the number 1 guy at strong safety. So Edwards, too, he had 46 tackles in 14 games, 7 pass breakups. We know what he can do in terms of getting his hands on the ball, whether it's a pass breakup or those interceptions or the forced fumbles. But I want to see, too, I mean, there was a reason why he didn't get more playing time with the Bucs. They didn't always trust him in those situations I guess they were a little worried about him getting beat deep or missing coverage on certain plays. John Ledier just talked about that a lot. I miss you, John. Got to get John back on the show soon enough. But another thing, too, he had 1 tackle for loss, and that's understandable, again, because of the limited amount of time that he really got to play last season. So I want to see if he's going to play strong safety. It would be silly of the Bucs to ask Mike Edwards to go and become the next Jordan Whitehead. They're just different players. You know, Whitehead is a heat-seeking missile when it comes to pursuing the ball carrier and getting those stops up front. I'm not saying he has to go and be Jordan Whitehead because, again, in terms of creating turnovers, I don't think anyone on the Bucs roster really compares to Mike Edwards at this standpoint. So I would really love to see what Edwards can do in terms of getting more playing time. Is there going to be any fatigue? I'm not exactly sure about that. But I think it's going to be a great opportunity for him. And if he keeps up with all the interceptions and everything like that, the Bucs are going to, I don't want to say lead the league because that's going to be a little bit early, but I do think that they could be top 5 in turnovers created just based on having Mike Edwards in the lineup more. We know what Antoine Winfield Jr. can be. He was a Pro Bowl player. I think he can become, an all-pro player. I guess that's the next step for him. Antoine Winfield Jr., of course, he's always a team first guy, so all he cares about is making it to the Super Bowl. But I think he can go all-pro there. And then Mike Edwards, full-time starter, see how he can perform stopping the run if they move him up in the box more. So 2 of the safeties are on the list here for players that are ready to take the next step. before I get into the next player, and he's, again, a lot of defensive guys on this list, I'm going to bring in another member of the Pewter Report squad. It is Bailey Adams. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Bailey is going to be making his Pewter Report debut. Bailey, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing all right, man. How you doing?
Oh, I am awesome. I am chugging along here on this Pewter Report podcast. Started out with the great interview with Dennis Brookner, then going solo dolo here. I keep saying solo dolo. That's going to be my, word of the day here. But Bailey, you're still fairly new to the Pewter Report family and the Pewter people. For everyone watching and listening to this show, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you started at, and now being a part of Pewter Report?
Yeah, it's been a crazy ride, actually. I grew up in Tampa, been around the Bucs my entire life, so know all about that. Know all about what you Bucs fans have been through over the years. I started, with the whole, covering the team back in 2016, and I joke about it all the time because I think one of my first articles that I wrote was kind of trying to justify the Roberto Aguayo pick.
Oh,
everyone's clicking out of the podcast right now as I'm talking. But I did that, and it was funny because when I left that first website that I was with, my last article for that website was about Jason Light's worst picks. I did his best 5 draft picks and his worst 5 draft picks up to that point. And so I started with, defending the Roberto Aguayo pick, and I ended with saying it was the worst pick of the Jason Light era so far. But then I went over to a new website. I was with Bucs Nation from around 2018 up until this past April. And now, man, I'm here with the Pewter Report team. It's been great so far. Loving being with the team.
Yeah, and you've been awesome since joining us right around the draft. I mean, we spent a lot of time together, especially on day 3 of the draft. And, you've had some great articles out. The Cam Brady article I really liked, even the way that you went about phrasing the Pewter Report article about the top 3 players under the age of 25. You have some great articles out right now, too. And we'll get back to the list that I had already been talking about. But, Bailey, since it's the first time that you're on the podcast show, let's just get your opinions about, the outlook of the Bucs overall, your thoughts on this year's draft class. You don't have to go 20 minutes on it, but just your overall thoughts there, since we haven't heard from the spoken voice, the spoken word of you on the show. Just your overall thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's funny that the timing of all this. My spoken voice is actually a little hoarse right now. I'm dealing with a little bit of a sickness from lack of sleep over the weekend at a friend's wedding. But I think they're in really good shape. It's funny the difference that just what a couple of months can make. When Tom Brady retired for the brief 40 days, it felt pretty dire, I think, for in a lot of ways. And I was trying to maintain a little bit of optimism and, not trying to say, oh, it's all doom and gloom, because there's still, outside of Tom Brady, there's still a lot of young talent. And I made that point in that article about the top 3 or the top 25 players under 25. The Bucs have 3 of them, and they have so many guys that are on the roster that really good players, really solid players. And I think obviously you need a really good quarterback, and that was the big question when Brady retired. But now that Brady's back, it feels like, they're right back on the road to being one of the favorites in the NFC. I think, I would put them right up there with the Rams. I think they're a little bit ahead of the Packers given what's happened in the Packers offseason, but you can't ever count the Packers out. I think they're in really good shape, and I like what they did with the draft class. I like, for the most part, I think there's some things we'll see how it pans out, but I've never been one to, I need to see some guys on the field first before I say, I can't stand that pick. There's somewhere I'm kind of I don't know about that. But then, you see him on the field, okay, all right, I'll shut up.
No, I agree with you 100%. It kind of drives me crazy sometimes when people are like, oh, this team had a terrible draft, or let's grade some of these draft picks. Because it's we haven't seen them on the field. Right now, we should be grading how, the 2017 and 2018 draft classes have started. Now, I understand, some teams, and again, I'm biased because I grew up in New York, but you could look at the Jets draft class and be like, all right, they did something good here in 2022. They had 3 first-round picks and arguably got the best receiver off the board, the best running back off the board, and best cornerback. So I think there's different degrees of it where you could see some guys doing well, some guys not. Shout out Dante Jones right here saying, trying Celsius for the first time because of you guys. Hope you enjoy it. I'm willing to bet that you will. All right, Bailey, I'm not sure if you heard some of my list already. We're talking about Bucs players that are ready to take the next step. My first two picks, because Antoine Winfield Jr. was already on the graphic, that's not really a surprise. But I said Antoine Winfield Jr. and Mike Edwards. And really to surmise it, I would just say Antoine Winfield Jr., we already know he's a really good player. Is he good? Is he great? That's still up for debate. But if he's good right now, I'm ready to see him become great next season. I think he will be. And if he's already great, I think he's going to become elite this season. And he already made it to a Pro Bowl, but let's see him make another Pro Bowl, get into that all-pro category. And I think that's a big thing about what Nick Rapone, the safeties coach, has been coaching him up on. The other one was Mike Edwards, again, because he's moving into a starting safeties role, which he hasn't had in his career yet, other than filling in for injuries and things like that. So for him to be a full-time starter, we know what he brings as a ball hawk. But now let's see him put it all together, in stopping the run, in better coverage outside of just getting your hand on a ball. So what do you think of those choices? Would you agree with that? Would you not agree with that? Or is Antoine Winfield already there? Tell me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think with Winfield, I would put him up there. I think over 2 years, he's been pretty great. Like, I think he's almost already at that great level, and I think he can take that next step to being elite. And I know Nick Rapone was saying, be the kind of safety that's going to get 6 or 7 interceptions a year. That's the one thing that's kind of been missing, because I think he's had like 1 or 2 over the first couple of years in the league. And so that's the big key for him. And yeah, I think he's ready to take that next step. And, I know you saw him his rookie year and you're like, okay, I mean, he's out playing, like he's not playing like a rookie. He's out playing even where he was drafted, as a second rounder. He's been key part of this defense that ended up winning the Super Bowl. Comes back in his second season, was, I think, just as good, if not better, earned a Pro Bowl nod. I think he's just on that solid ascension. And I think year 3 is going to be even bigger. Mike Edwards is an interesting one because we've seen a lot of flashes of Mike Edwards, and it's probably the definition of like that next step. Like, he needs to take get into that next level of the type of player he's going to be, because we can't rely on he's going to like step in every once in a while and make a big interception or come up with a clutch moment, because he's had some of those. But we need to see the consistency when he's going to step in and he's going to get every chance to be the starting safety. He's got Keanu Neal probably breathing down his neck, but he's going to get this chance, especially with the contract situation that he's in. The Bucs need to see if he's a guy that they can keep around for the long run.
Yeah, I love those 2 points that you just made. Consistency is going to be key with Mike Edwards, because for all the great plays that he's made, there's a reason why he hasn't been on the field all the time, because occasionally he gets burned with the big play. And of course, the contract year, every player is always looking for that second contract. So that's something that we got to pay attention to. In terms of consistency, this next player who I am naming as the poster boy of this topic of which player is ready to take the next step, it's got to be Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. We already know the case where it doesn't look like Jason Pierre-Paul is going to be back. So that means it's going to be Joe Tryon-Shoyinka lining up at outside linebacker opposite of Shaq Barrett. We saw a lot of JTS last year in limited roles. He played in 17 games, had 6 starts, 4 sacks, 29 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, played about 49% of the defensive snaps. And it's funny, Bailey, because he had 4 sacks, but he could have had probably double that amount with the amount of times that he got to the backfield and got to the quarterback and just wasn't really able to finish the job. So I really think for JTS, it's going to come down to consistency, but with the size, the strength, the athleticism, for him to play as a full-time starter and just line up at outside linebacker versus getting kicked inside so JPP can also play the outside linebacker position, I think that's going to be great for him. It's going to help him in his development, and I think we're going to see things trying to get this.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch because, with the first two, like with Antoine Winfield Jr., he's already very good. He's already in a spot where, the Bucs can rely on him. Mike Edwards, he's shown flashes and all of that, but, even if he doesn't necessarily take that next step forward, I think he's still pretty reliable. Plus they have, the security blanket of Keanu Neal. With Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, it's a necessity that he has to take the next step, for this defense and, to play on the outside, take over for JPP. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. He had those 4 sacks last year, probably could have had, at least 7 or 8. Like you said, he would get to the quarterback and just, we need to see him finish those sacks. I was just looking at it a little bit earlier, and he was 4th on the team in pressures or 4th on the defensive line in pressures in just the limited role that he played. And I think 5th overall on the team in pressure rate. And so he was getting the opportunities that he got. He was effective. It's just, again, it's with the consistency thing where he's stepping into that full-time role. He's got to get the job done. And there's not really a lot behind him to give him a security blanket like Keanu Neal is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have Anthony Nelson there who did play well last season. But yeah, I mean, if you're picking Joe Tryon-Shoyinka or Anthony Nelson, you're going to go with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. And we all know about the lack of depth after Anthony Nelson. We don't know who the 4th outside linebacker is going to be. And I think it's even more crucial this year, too, and for everyone who hasn't read Scott Reynolds' Fab 5, he'll have a new one out tomorrow. But last week's Fab 5, he spoke a lot about just, the heavy hitters of quarterbacks that the Bucs have to play against this year you just look at the first 4 games. You got Dak Prescott. We could skip over the Saints. We know what's going on there. It's going to be Jameis Winston. I think that quarterback competition ended a year ago, but still Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers week 3, Mahomes week 4, Matthew Stafford later in the season, Lamar Jackson. So you're going to need to get home a lot with that 4-man pass rush. I mean, go back to the Super Bowl. We all know Todd Bowles didn't blitz as much, and they were just able to get home with Shaq and JPP, and it caused a ton of chaos for Patrick Mahomes. Matthew Stafford was the best against the blitz, so you're not going to really want to send the blitz there too. And rattling Aaron Rodgers, the best way to stop him is by getting the sacks, and that was the big difference for the Bucs in those games. So really, it's going to be a lot on Joe Tryon-Shoyinka just for the mere fact that they have to stop these elite quarterbacks, and there's no better way to do that. It's cliche, I know, but there's no better way to do that than just getting home with the 4-man front versus sending all these blitzes. And we know how Todd Bowles, whether he's the DC or the new head coach, loves to send the kitchen sink in a various degree of different ways.
Well, I think what'll help him obviously was the playing time he did get last year, because JPP wasn't healthy the whole year. So, JTS was able to step in and, get some of those reps that I think gave him some of the growing pains that you're going to imagine a rookie's going to have. And so, maybe he'll have a little bit more of those when he's stepping in as a full-time starter. But I really think, last year is going to help him a ton as he just kind of steps right in this year and gets going.
If you're going to bet on the number of sacks that Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is going to get this year, and I'd be willing to bet it's going to be more than 4 this season, the best place to go to that would be mybookie.ag, as you see up there. And folks, mybookie.ag, as you see, you got the PGA Championship that just started today. And even though we're already in the middle of the round, Tiger Woods was golfing earlier. Rory McIlroy had a great day. But you could bet on the rest of the week. You can bet on matchups of, this golfer against this golfer for Friday. Who do you think is going to play better? You can bet on that. You could bet on an outright winner. You can bet on who's going to make the cut, who's going to have a top 20 finish. So there's multiple different things that you could bet on with the PGA Championship. And of course, you also have playoff hockey. The Bolts play tonight. Playoff basketball. I believe it's Heat Celtics tonight. And the baseball season is going on right now. Baseball, there's 162 games. It could feel like a grind to watch, but you can put excitement back into it with each and every game with MyBookie. There's run lines, money lines, and props galore. I personally like first inning, no runs. You just bet on neither team to score in the first inning. You just watch that part of it, and then you can go on with your day. But nobody gives you more opportunities to win than MyBookie. Getting started is simple. Just deposit whatever you want, up to $1,000, and use the promo code Pewter, and MyBookie will match that deposit bonus. Whether you're a diehard fan or a newcomer to the sport, there's never been a better time to join the MyBookie family. Go ahead and sign up today using the promo code Pewter to secure your first deposit bonus up to $1,000 with MyBookie. Whatever you put in, they'll meet halfway. That's that's a disclaimer. It's halfway, not the full deposit. But either way, you put in, $500, they're going to match you with $250. That's a free $250 to bet on the Lightning to win tonight. So bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Again, that's mybookie.ag and use the promo code Pewter. Bailey, I appreciate you spending some time with us. I know your time is limited right now in terms of your appearance on the Pewter Report podcast. Are you able to stay a little bit longer? Do you have to get going soon?
Good, man. I'm good.
Hell yeah. Let's rock and roll, brother. I got 2 more guys on the list, and feel free to, if you have someone else, that's fine, or I'd love to just get your analysis on it. One guy is a very young and up-and-coming player, but I think he's going to have an important role this year in terms of it's going to be a depth role, but we saw a lot of injuries at this position last year, and it's a very significant position. I really think KJ Britt, after hearing from the coaches, even Keith Armstrong, the special teams coach, we asked him about his role on special teams, and he said, I don't really know how much we're going to see him because they're really trying to mold him into that third inside linebacker with Kevin Minter not back yet. And that's something Larry Foote talked about a lot too, that he's a smart player. He's really understanding the game. They just want to get that athleticism up. I think this is a huge opportunity for KJ Britt to take the game and really become a crucial, vital player, because we saw Lavonte David get injured last year. We saw a little regression of Devin White. Now he could bounce back this year, but we're still looking at a situation where if one of those players goes down, they're going to need an inside linebacker to step up, because inside linebacker is important in every defense, but particularly with what Lavonte and Devin White can do, they're going to need a guy to step up with KJ Britt. And I think he's got the smarts, he's got the understanding and the anticipation. He only had 12 tackles last season, 1 tackle for loss, though, obviously in a limited role. But if he can, nail this third inside linebacker job, that's going to be huge for Tampa Bay moving forward, considering where they drafted him a season ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the bigger surprises of the offseason to me is that they didn't, address that in, a depth inside linebacker role. I know they liked Kevin Minter, for the last few years, and I don't know that I necessarily expected him to be back, but at this stage in the offseason, I would have expected them to add someone else, potentially, to sit behind Lavonte David and Devin White. But with KJ Britt, it's one of those where out of necessity, they need him to step into a bigger role and they need him to develop into that guy that they can count on. And I know, I think maybe there's probably some limitations to his game, but I think there were some limitations to Kevin Minter's game. It's not like they need him to be, they don't need him to be like a star on the defense. They need him to play a role. And, I think, from what we've heard from the coaches, he sounds ready to play that role. And, we saw here last year, we saw him on special teams too. I mean, he looked good on special teams, but they say he seems to be ready, and that's what the role they want for him. So I'm interested to see it.
And I think we saw so many times, especially the year that the Bucs won the Super Bowl in 2020, where depth guys came in, and you don't need them, as you said, you don't need them to be superstars. Like right off the top of my head, Aaron Stinney coming in and replacing Alex Kappa was huge. The Bucs didn't really miss a beat. Kevin Minter struggled a little bit this season, but again, the Super Bowl winning year, he played in a playoff game because Devin White was on the COVID list. Vita Vea missed the majority of that season, and the rest of the defensive tackles there with Nacho and Will Golston were able to right the ship and keep it steady until Vita Vea came back for the NFC Championship game. So I really think Britt falls into that category of, again, don't do anything outside of your game. Just stay within what you know how to do. And, the rest of the defense is talented enough to really go and pick up the rest of the slack. Shout out to Ibrahim again here. He says, I'm very interested to see how far KJ Britt develops. If history is any forecast, he will have to start a couple of games. Yeah, that again goes back to the fact that Lavonte David was hurt last year, and we didn't even know if he's going to be playing in the playoff games that he was able to come back for. And Devin White has missed some time, so definitely need him to step up. Alien Mastodon here says, hopefully KJ Britt can do well in coverage. Yeah, that's been the knock at times with Devin White. I think Devin White got better at that and then got a little bit worse in terms of run coverage this year. A good comment here from I Like Rice. Nassib should come back. He was awesome with Tampa. Yeah, that's something that we talked about in the past in terms of on this show, I believe last week or 2 weeks ago, in terms of other veteran players coming in here. I think I was about to say Carlton Davis. I think Carl Nassib would be a great fit in the sense of he's already been here. He's played in this defense with Todd Bowles. He was the team captain. So, he's all in with the rest of the teammates. He's well liked in the locker room. I mean, he was a leader on this team, and I think for where Nassib is at this point of his career, he's fine with taking a backup role, some limited snaps, and would make a really great depth piece on this team.
It's easy to see the fit. I mean, obviously he fit well before, and I know he's been away for a couple years now, and it's honestly maybe easy to forget that he played in this defense. It seems like so long ago at this point. But yeah, he was productive, and I think especially for the role they would need him in, I wouldn't hate it.
Yeah. All right, Bailey. I have one more player on this list, and we've talked a ton about defense, but I finally an offensive player on this list in terms of players that I personally ready to connect. And granted, yesterday's show was a lot of offense, not too much defense. Today's show, a lot of defense, but we're getting a little bit of offense here. And the last player I have on my list is wide receiver Cyril Grayson Jr., Cyril Grayson, depending on how you pronounce it. Obviously, what he did towards the end of the season, I thought was great. For the whole year, he only had 10 receptions for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. But you look at his last 2 games of the season, he got hurt before the season finale, didn't play in the playoffs. But the game at the Carolina Panthers, 3 receptions for 81 yards, and he had that key block on the Keyshawn Vaughn huge touchdown run. Next week, 6 receptions for 81 yards against the New York Jets. I really think this is a great opportunity for Grayson. The whole talk with him has just been about, okay, he's understanding the game, he's learning it. It's he was a track star at LSU, and now he's learning to be a wide receiver. Now he's becoming that wide receiver. That's a lot about what Kevin Garver talked about and Byron Leftwich. I think he's going to be in that competition to be, if not the wide receiver 4, the wide receiver 5. When you match his speed, his willingness to do everything, his chemistry with Tom Brady. Obviously, he scored that game-winning touchdown against the Jets, one of his 2 touchdowns on the season, 2 tutties for Cyril Grayson. I don't want to say the sky's the limit because he probably does have but I'm very optimistic about what he can do this year.
It's one to watch. I think, especially one thing you just said that I didn't even really remember, and now it's coming back to me, is on that touchdown run by Keyshawn Vaughn, that block. And I think that's going to be one of the keys, because there's so many guys in this wide receiver competition, behind Evans, Godwin, Gage, and you're going to have to find some of the separators and the differentiators. And I think blocking in the run game is something that's going to be super important. And it's something that, we saw him do it on that play, just as long as we see him do it consistently, that could be a leg up for him. And I kind of do wonder too, with him getting hurt right before the playoffs, I wonder what the playoffs would have looked like had he not. And it's weird to say that. It's really like, would things have gone differently with Grayson healthy? But they might have. That's the state that the Bucs wide receiver room was in at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a chance that the Bucs didn't necessarily go down 27-3 and then wouldn't have found themselves in a situation where they had to scramble all the way back just to get their hearts broken at the end. But I think overall, just that competition for wide receiver 4 is going to be a lot of fun. You have some veteran guys, some younger players that have been in the league for 1 to 2 years that have an opportunity to see if they can develop. And then you have a lot of the undrafted rookie free agents too. And I think Grayson in the playoffs really would have been something, just the overall game face, the mentality. And speaking of games that we're talking about, another fun game to play is bowling. And if you're going to go and bowl, the number one place to go and do that is at Pin Chasers. You see it on the screen there. So many different locations for Pin Chasers: East Pasco, Zephyr Hills, Midtown, and Veterans. They got one very close to where the facility is for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The cool thing is Pin Chasers is more than just, a bowling alley. It's a fun event to go out for a night with friends and with family. You could book your kid's birthday party there. They got an arcade section too, so the kids can bowl and also play some video games at the arcade. Their food is underrated, and they bring it right to you as well. You don't even have to get up from your chair. The servers will come and bring it to you. And they have tons and tons of deals every single day. They got all-you-can-eat pizza, all-you-can-bowl, Dollar Miller Lights. They got brunch on the weekend. So make sure you go to pinchasers.net, see all the deals that they have, and you can reserve a lane or book a party. Again, pinchasers.net. Anthony Peroni, the owner, is a huge Bucs fan, has season tickets, so you're helping out fellow Bucs fans. That's pinchasers.net. Okay, Bailey, that is the list that I have in terms of Bucs players that I believe are ready to take the next step this season and really be huge contributors for Tampa Bay this season. I do want to take a couple of more just comments from the fans because I appreciate everyone watching this show. John V says, my concern is who can Bucs really rely on to be wide receiver 4-3 when Godwin is out. There will be plenty of reps to be had even after Chris Godwin comes back. It's funny you mentioned that, John V, because that was another story that Scott Reynolds had today about who's going to pick up the slack when it comes to Chris Godwin not being in the lineup. And we guessed yesterday when he's going to come back. Honestly, it's up in the air. I was actually on the phone last night with a friend of mine that tore his ACL about a year ago, and he said that he's still kind of recovering from it. Now, granted, my friend is not, getting the treatment from, world-class doctors and trainers and doesn't have the type of rehab that Chris Godwin has. And of course, Chris Godwin is, an all-time athlete, so he's going to recover quicker. But in the case that Chris Godwin really has to miss some time, I think the obvious answer is Russell Gage is going to be the top guy that can go and move around, play in the slot, play outside as well too, and really be that complement to Mike Evans there. But I think it's going to be more of, sure, whoever wins that number 4 spot. But we've seen Tyler Johnson. He had that opportunity last year to step up. We saw that with Rashad Perriman. So that's why I really think it could be Grayson that takes that role this year. And I also think, too, when Godwin got hurt last season, we saw more of an emphasis of getting Leonard Fournette involved in the passing game. And he started racking up some more receptions, racking up huge touchdown games. He obviously had a great game against the Indianapolis Colts where he scored multiple touchdowns, through the air and on the ground as well, too. So I see, Fournette being that catalyst, but then also, as Josh S. says right here, too, Rachaad White, I think, is going to fill that role, and Giovanni Bernard as well, too, if he's healthy this year. So I think there's multiple options. It's not just going to be wide receiver that's going to, address that situation. It's going to be a group effort, and obviously you have Tom Brady there. So anytime you got Brady, you have a chance to win with whoever's around you.
Well, that's the good thing is there's no shortage of options. They have, for that number 4 receiver role, they have 5, 6, 7 guys probably in the mix.
Yeah.
And then they have, those, like you said, like you mentioned, the running backs, and that's what's interesting too, is, when you say Grayson is one of those guys that might have to step up in Godwin's absence, like what we were just talking about with, blocking in the run game, what's Godwin really good at? He's a good blocker.
Yeah, they use him as a fullback sometimes.
Yeah. So if Grayson is able to show that he can block in the run game, it's going to give him a leg up. So it's all about probably just, I don't want to say damage control because that makes it sound, I guess, more, it sounds rougher than it is. Because I think they're still in an okay spot, for the first few weeks if they have to, let Godwin recover a little bit more. But I think it's about, getting through those weeks, getting the wins you can get, and then getting Godwin back on the field 100%.
Yeah, I agree. And they definitely can't rush him back, I think, because that would be a huge mistake if he's not 100%, but he just, just wants to get on the field. Good comment here from Joe Grizz. He says, Tom just going to spread that thing around to the open guy, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, if there's anyone that you want playing with, I guess, not your top guys, it would be Tom Brady because he's been through that situation multiple times. Like, he is going to air it out, and whoever's open is going to make a play because Tom Brady makes other players around him better. And I think there's going to be more of an emphasis in the run game. It's not going to be 50-50. And I know Bucs fans aren't necessarily going to love that, but Brady has always excelled when he has like a top 5, a top 10 run game. I think that could be a situation that we run into, no pun intended, this season, just trying to be more effective in the run game.
Yeah, no, I think so. And that would probably be a huge key. I mean, you look at some of the offenses Brady's been in New England, and, they didn't always have top caliber receivers, but he always made it work. So that's where I think, he is, again, he's going to be 45 years old. So that is a little bit of a different element. He's not like he's playing with a lesser receiver group in his 30s or 20s still. Yeah. But, I think if you want to count on anyone to get through those couple weeks without a top receiver like Godwin, it's Tom Brady.
Yeah. Tom Brady has made it work with the Patriots. He's clearly made it work with the Bucs. And all the Pewter people watching and listening to this, you can make it work by hitting the like button and the subscribe button. We're on the way to try to get to 9K and eventually 10K. So anytime you can go and hit the like button, it really helps us with our algorithm, helps grow the brand of Pewter Report and Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel. We're starting to get a lot more podcast clips, shorten it up. We understand not everyone can watch a whole hour's worth of a podcast, so we're cutting those up more. We got a lot of great clips out there of just us being at the facility, talking to Todd Bowles, Cam Britt, Rashad White, everyone in between. Got a lot of that going up on our YouTube channel. So make sure you like and subscribe. And just want to say thanks again to Dennis Brookner for joining the show today. Thank you, Bailey Adams, for joining the show. Your debut, you absolutely crushed it. Great job there. So, folks, we will be back again next week for a Monday edition. And let's remember, Monday around 4:20, it's going to be Roll Call. Tell us where you're from, where you're watching it, and enjoying your Buccaneers content from. So, for Bailey Adams, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll be back Monday for another edition of the Pewter Report Podcast. Have a great weekend. Out.